my entire sort of reputation career is on the line here. And so if I were starting to spew bogus science or information, that would be a real problem for me. And so I think that's really helpful that people have a place to go to that they know is safe and trusted. Even if you're not talking about influencers or creators, when you see what's on the packaging, there's no regulation from companies being able to say this is eco-friendly, all natural ingredients.
Welcome to Becoming Radical, the podcast for creators, builders, and dreamers just like you. What does it mean to become radical in a world of constant change? Hosted by Michael Gaizutis, each week we'll explore the real-time journeys of those rewriting the rules. From untold failures to groundbreaking success. If you're ready to break the boundaries of limited thinking, this is your guide to unlimited growth.
Welcome to Becoming Radical again. We are here today with Lizzie Horvitz. Lizzie, it's so nice to have you here. Thanks for taking the time.
Michael, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're really impressed. It takes a lot to impress us, but looking at your background, it's pretty game-changing. I know right now you're the founder and CEO of Finch, and you guys are in the sustainability space. So I'm really excited to hear about that. I guess a first question for you, what inspired you to first create Finch? And how did these early experiences you had living off the grid influence your mission with Finch?
It's a great question. I was inspired by this work really when I was 16. So a very long time ago. I don't want to age myself, but quite some time ago. And yeah, as you mentioned, I lived off the grid, and this was 2004. And if you remember back to that time, people obviously were aware of climate change, but not talking about it nearly to the extent that they are today. And so I was exposed to this beautiful way of life, of living on solar panels and a wind generator, growing our own food, able to shower if it didn't rain, like really taking care of our resources, before I fully understood the dangers of climate change. And I think, unfortunately, so many people are exposed to climate change in this really scary way of, oh my goodness, there are wildfires and droughts and, oil issues and all these problems. And I came at it from a really beautiful way, which made me, I think, more optimistic about the potentials of doing something about it. And so that started when I was 16. And then since then, I've really dedicated my work towards solutions to these global problems that we're having.
Wow. It sounds like you have a passion for these environmental issues and a deeper focus on sustainability. I'm a big advocate for it, from prefab construction to solar to looking at different ways to reuse and create more renewable resources. I think it's really fascinating. If we decode sustainability a little bit, how does Finch, the company that you run as founder and CEO, how do you evaluate and rate products and their environmental and social impacts? What does that really look like?
So if we take a step back to what we think of as sustainability, it's really living a way that meets our needs but doesn't compromise the needs of future generations, right? And so I always like to underline that Finch was started not for the people who are excited to make their own detergent in their bathtubs and live off the grid and live in a completely different way. I think that is such a respectable way of life. That's not the way that I live. And I think that it's semi-unrealistic for the majority of the population. So Finch really started to say, no product is perfect. There's no physical product that uses ingredients and materials and energy that obviously is going to be absolutely perfect, but there are ones that are better than others. And so the way that we evaluate really, and this has changed a little bit, but we look at the category overall, let's say dishwashing detergent, and we say, okay, there are liquids, pods, powder. Let's start there and figure out what's better than what, right? Powder is better than liquid. Pods are often better than powder. And so we're not comparing dishwashing detergent to tennis shoes. We're just saying within dishwashing detergent, there are products that are much more problematic than others. And let's have a relativity as opposed to an absolute sort of score. And we actually don't do scoring anymore. We don't rate out of 10. We just say, these are our preferred brands and products, and everything else is not as good.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I love that. And I think, that goes back to this idea of common misconceptions, that consumers might have about sustainable products. How do you think Finch addresses those common misconceptions about sustainability and product design? And, where do you guys fill that gap, you think?
I think one of the biggest frustrations that I see to that question is people don't often look holistically at an entire product, right? They see a material, they see something's made out of paper instead of plastic, or something's made without a certain chemical, but what that's replaced with isn't necessarily any better, right? So, for example, people get really scared of seeing chemicals that they don't fully understand. Chemicals are not always bad, right? Chemicals are everywhere, first of all. So to say that something's made without chemicals is not really realistic in the first place. But, one example I think of is palm oil. Palm oil sounds really nice and natural, and it's palm oil. This is a natural ingredient. It's not a chemical. Palm oil is one of the most destructive ingredients you could possibly put in products, right?
Yep.
So people are not yet literate, I would say, at understanding sort of the full scope of what a product entails. You're looking at climate impacts, land use impacts, how is it recycled, what's the biodiversity implications, everything together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And am I right? Is palm oil a seed oil? Do I have that right?
It's a seed oil, yes.
Yeah,
and the problem is it's made generally on monocultures, and so it's the only thing that's planted, and it is incredibly destructive, leads to deforestation. There are a lot of human rights issues associated with it. So we generally try to avoid palm oil. But if you're just looking at an ingredients list, you'd rather see that than, say, phthalates or something, right? Which aren't good, but just as one example.
Yeah, it's a really good example. I think it's so interesting when we talk to people and they have such a diverse background, and they come from either the corporate side or the startup side to the corporate side. So in your case, looking at your background, it looked like you were at Unilever before. How did that really prepare you for launching and leading Finch? I also saw Yale in there in the mix, going to Yale, which is really impressive. How did that really help you in the culmination of creating Finch in the beginning? And, do you think it's really helped you in some way, shape, or form to get to where you are with Finch?
Absolutely. It's funny to think about my journey, because I would say for the first half of my career, I thought that I would be at Unilever forever. I thought I would be, the goal was going to be head of sustainability at a huge national corporation like that.
Yeah.
And I had never, ever thought about starting my own company. I went to business school. I went to Yale for business school and for a master's in environmental management, and didn't take one entrepreneurship class, just completely avoided that side of the building. And so Unilever was really important for me to sort of get to that next step of, how do large companies think about sustainability? Particularly ones like Unilever that really, at least in my time when I was there, really valued sustainability and did the work to try to do the right thing. They didn't always do it successfully, but I think Paul Pullman, who was the CEO, really tried to integrate that into all aspects of Unilever. So that was really important. It also was important to understand how these big companies cooperate, because so much of the sustainability sector is trying to influence these big companies to do one thing or another. And if you've never been inside of a company to understand, what are they prioritizing? What does the P&L look like? What are these difficult questions? What is the procurement team made of? How do you speak in their language? You're not going to get very far. It doesn't work very well to knock on Unilever's doors and say, hey, this is better for the environment. I don't know anything about the financial fallbacks or anything else, but do this because it's the right thing. That's not going to be very successful. And so I think for me to understand how a company operated, albeit it was obviously a short time, it was not even quite 3 years, it was really, really helpful for me. But interestingly, I got to that sort of nearing the three-year mark thinking, it's really important from an impact standpoint. If you make a change in the temperature that's allowed on trucks for ice cream to travel, that has global implications because of Unilever's footprint. But
Yeah.
in terms of culture and my own sort of impact and work that I was doing on a day-to-day basis, I really didn't enjoy it. And so that's kind of when I pivoted to the entrepreneurship side of things. I worked at a different startup, and that's where I really learned, like, hey, I actually, didn't study this, but love it and am not bad at it. I'm better at this than I was at my corporate job at Unilever.
Yeah.
So a good sort of in between. And then when I started Finch, I started it as a blog at first, actually. Just
Really?
It was in 2017, and I remember this because I think Trump had just gotten elected for the first time, or he had just been inaugurated for the first time. And so many people were coming to me with questions like, okay, now I'm nervous because the government is not going to do what it should be on the point of climate change. I feel like I need to take this into my own hands. So, questions like, I just had a baby, what type of diaper should I buy? Or what does aluminum do in my deodorant, et cetera? And so I started this blog. I didn't know all the answers. I still don't know all the answers. I'm always learning. But I was able to sort of communicate this in a way that really resonated with people. And so then when COVID hit, I decided this would be a great thing to do full time in whatever form it takes.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I think it's definitely been a state of awakening with what you talked about politically. It's been a very interesting period of time, hasn't it?
Yes.
And it still is. To be fair, it still is. It's back again. We're back again. We're here again. So, politics aside, I think it's so cool to hear your story and your transition points from corporate to startup to Finch to being a blog to now creating something bigger with much more impact. And it's so important to go through that journey because it all adds to the mix of what we know and how we're able to then grow from that knowledge, from that ecosystem of learning. And like you said, and I love that sense of humility you have. I'm always learning. I think we're always learning, right? All of us. So if we think about obstacles that consumers face right now that you see in making these sustainable choices, how do you think Finch right now today helps to overcome those obstacles for people, for regular people?
That's a great question. And I think there are two obstacles that come to mind immediately. The first is convenience, really. Doing a one-click buy on Amazon and having it be at your doorstep in, less than 24 hours is something that's, especially, I have a baby at home. When you're really busy, make it to the store. That's a really helpful thing to be able to do. Not ideal, obviously, from the carbon footprint of travel, but more just because the options that are available on Amazon, they actually don't sell everything. There are a lot of amazing D2C companies that are doing much better work than what Amazon is selling. So I think that's one that's difficult. And Finch is providing an alternative. It's not helping with convenience, admittedly, in the sense that we can get you something in 24 hours. But every product that we recommend, we try really hard to not direct you to Amazon or sort of big box company. We will show you, here are 5 hand lotions that you've probably never heard of that are so in terms of the searching for, I really want a hand lotion, that is helping convenience because we're taking the time out of you. You don't have 10 minutes to search this. You can just Finch, go to our page and find a different place to buy it. The other thing that I think is really difficult is this greenwashing and sponsorship space that all sort of meld into one. I think so many bloggers and creators and other people are selling products or helping to sell products because they're getting paid for it. And Finch does not take on any sponsorships or paid promotions or anything. And so we're really able to say, we're promoting this product because we love it and because it has the right ingredients, not because we're getting any type of cutback. And so for us, it's really one of the only places that people can fully trust. And when people ask, well, how can I trust you guys, even if you're not getting paid? How do I know that this is legit? my entire sort of reputation career is on the line here. And so if I were starting to spew bogus science or information, that would be a real problem for me. And so I think that's really helpful that people have a place to go to that they know is safe and trusted. Whereas even if you're not talking about influencers or creators, when you see what's on the packaging, there's no regulation from companies being able to say this is eco-friendly, all natural ingredients,
Right.
non-toxic. These buzzwords don't mean anything. They're unregulated. And so it makes it really difficult for the consumer to know, like, is this okay or not? And what should I be looking at otherwise?
Yeah. It's almost like cage-free eggs. You see cage-free eggs, you see, these hens walking around on the label and you think, oh yeah, everything is great. They're in big pastures, but it's just marketing speak. So we totally get it. And I think that's all the rage. There's a lot of marketing speak, marketing fluff. But what's really cool from what I understand about your model is that it goes beyond that. It really is about impact. It's about vetting products that actually make a difference, that actually help people, that you're putting your reputation on the line. You're thinking about what can actually create a better decision path for a person and for their family and for, whatever they need it for whatever use case. That's really cool. It's really special and it's very rare. So kudos to you guys.
What's interesting about that is that I'm starting what we started with in terms of product categories. We're very low risk. We're not scoring cars or, houses or things like that. That's a really huge decision that someone doesn't want to make the wrong one. If you buy a new brand of toilet paper, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're not going to love it. And in, 3 weeks, you're going to have to buy another one, right? So what's kind of nice about our model is that it's like, why not just try this brand? Because the risk is so low to you. So that's what we like about it.
Oh, that's awesome. And then do you find that a lot of those products are actually better products, not just in terms of ingredients and sustainability, but maybe they're just a better product overall, and maybe they're serving a better purpose for the people buying them? Do you see that as well?
I really do. I think that it's a long common misconception that you're trading something into buying a more sustainable product. I think generally we know 100% that it's better for your health, which we would include in sustainability. But when you think of, these movements on non-toxic living and putting that in air quotes, people concerned with endocrine disruptors and other big health issues. Generally, if something's made without those types of ingredients, it's also better for the environment. They go hand in hand. Yeah. But also in terms of something working better, yes. And that's a big thing that we need to be careful about. It's probably one of the biggest challenges for Finch because we're recommending six different products in each category at this point. I'm a one-woman show right now, so I can't really vet. There are tons and tons of these products that I've never tried myself. So I rely on my community to say, like, hey, I know this toilet paper is bamboo, but it feels absolutely awful, and I'm not going to use it anymore. Not what we want, right? Because buying a sustainable product and then not using it to its fullest extent is often worse than buying not as great product, but using the whole thing. And so probably a big challenge, but we do find that a lot of these smaller companies are also making products that people prefer regardless of how sustainable they are. I remember one example is my sister had a baby before I did, and she recommended a diaper brand. My sister's not necessarily, she has other causes that she cares about. Sustainability isn't top on her list. And she happened to recommend the most sustainable diaper to me. She said, this is great. My son's never had any issues with it. We're never using another diaper brand. And I remember thinking, wow, I've done research on this brand and it's actually the best one out there from a sustainability standpoint. And so that's so fun and great when that happens, when two can really go hand in hand and you can really preach the use of the product and not just the sustainability behind it.
It's so cool. And as it relates to impact aligned with business model, can you explain to everyone listening, Finch's business model and how it balances profitability with promoting sustainability? How are you guys bridging that gap? I know that can always be tough because, early on, you're really focused on the core value add of vetting the right products and releasing the right things. But how are you balancing that? What does that look like for you guys?
So it's actually taken a lot of different lives. When it first started, we felt very strongly that this should be free information to any customer. We didn't want money to be a barrier to accessing this information. And we wanted to put the cost on these businesses to pay for, well, what are people thinking about our product and how can we make it better and what does a competitive landscape look like, et cetera. That turned out to is a great idea in theory, but it just didn't work from a monetization standpoint. So now I've completely pivoted, and it's a simple subscription model where basically you can get a certain amount of free information. Our social is free. A lot of our website is free. But if you want a deep dive into the products that I recommend and a weekly newsletter that sort of dives into even more information, you'll have to pay. And it's $50 a year or $5 a month. It's pretty affordable, we found, for most people and that are wanting to access this information. And so that's really how we can sustain ourselves and also avoid the issue of, hey, seventh generation want to pay us and we'll promote this product for you.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's really cool. And I think that's a pretty low barrier to entrance in terms of cost structure for somebody who wants to see value beyond the basics. And it makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like with technology, there's obviously a role for every business and brand as we think about the introduction of technology. How are you guys using technology, be it browser extensions or, enhancing user engagement around education for Finch? What does that look like for you and your tech stack, and how are you embracing it?
Well, what I'm really excited about is our AI integration. I think that's been something, that's been on our radar for years since we started.
That's cool.
In the new iteration of our website that we just launched about a month ago, we partnered with a company called Dewey, which is a fantastic company. They're on a bunch of other websites, and essentially they've scraped all of the research that we've already done, all of the work that we've put in the last 5 years, where you are, as a consumer, are able to type in, how sustainable are car washes? How do I make sure that car washes are sustainable? Or something that's obviously more in our wheelhouse, like, do you recommend a certain diaper? And we'll sort of sift through all of that information and give you an answer. We call it Atticus. But
wow, that's cool. Yeah,
that's a really fun way to leverage technology. We used to have a very detailed algorithm that would give a product, we would score millions and millions of products, would give anywhere between sort of a 1.1 and a 9.9 on a scale. We don't do that anymore because we found, for a couple of reasons. A, because we don't have the team that we had. It's, again, just me and a couple of contractors. But B, we found that it wasn't that helpful for consumers to see, like, is this a 6.6 or 6.7? We would prefer to just say, this is a product we recommend, this is one we don't, or this is one that's kind of in the middle where you could do better, but also it's not the worst decision that you could make, just to simplify the consumers.
Makes sense. Simplification, sometimes it works. It works really well. Keep it simple, and I think that's the key. It's, find a way to create that level of resonance and impact, get people to try it, get people to enjoy it, and, make it easy for them. So it makes total sense. I love the AI component. I think so many brands are latching onto that positively. And if you can do it in a way that's kind of minimalistic, that can be very, very valuable. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. When I first was thinking about what this new iteration would look like, I was talking to someone, and I'm a non-technical founder. I've learned a lot in the past several years, but certainly couldn't code or do anything like that. And someone once said, you should just create some GPTs. And I was like, I can't do that. I don't have the background. It's like, I promise you can. And I I didn't really believe him, but it's actually so incredible to see how accessible AI is. And
incredible.
Of course, there are dangers with it and fears of what might happen in the future. But the fact that I've really been able to leverage that really on my own as a non-technical person in Finch has been really exciting.
You have to get on the AI train to use it to your advantage, to help you, to be a support system. And it isn't as hard as people think. You're right. The other day I wrote up a contract using AI, and I'm not a lawyer. So it's like, because I was waiting for an attorney, I was like, well, I'm going to do it myself, so we did. And it worked. Then we ran it by them, but it worked really, really well. So there's so many use cases for that. Sometimes it has a direct involvement in your business. Sometimes it has to do with working on the business. Sometimes it has nothing to do with your business. But exactly. You're right. AI can be powerful. And you're also right. There are a lot of fears. And there's a lot of fears about a lot of things. But I think it's really important to just realize it can be a helpful hand in your pursuit of becoming radical and changing and challenging the market and doing what you do really, really well in your business. And that kind of brings me to another question. When you think about the future of sustainable products for you guys specifically, what trends are you seeing or do you foresee with, sustainable consumer products? And how are you guys positioning yourself for that future? What does that look like?
I think there are a couple of trends that come to mind immediately that are sort of on the slow ramp right now, but I think will start revving up. One of them is a refillable model. I think, Unilever actually just acquired a company called Wild that makes refillable deodorants.
Oh,
and
wow.
They actually talk about how this is an incredible deodorant brand that sort of has a different branding than your natural other competitors.
Yeah.
And that is a pretty simple, like, you use it, you send it back, they'll refill it for you, or they can dispose of the materials better than you can in your own sort of residential recycling. I think it was disheartening to see sort of the TerraCycle loop, which if you're familiar, if you're not familiar, was the kind of that exact same thing where you could get these normal everyday products, but in either aluminum or glass containers. You'd use them and then you'd send them back. I think people just aren't used to doing that. People still, it's kind of a slog to head to UPS or FedEx or whatever. But if we can get economies of scale, Amazon has been able to do it on the other side of just delivering to the same neighborhoods every single day. There has to be sort of a logistics side to make this easier to reuse and refill, I think, and to put the onus on the companies and to have them figure it out. So that's the first one. And I think related to that, but separate, is so many products right now are made with water. When you think of shampoo, body wash, conditioner, really anything that comes in like a plastic jar that's in your shower is probably like over 50% water. And when you think about the amount of energy it takes to transport a heavier package made mostly of water, when you have water already in your shower and already at home that you can fill up yourself, is kind of silly, for lack of a better word. And so, and this is already happening with shampoo bars and conditioner bars. Obviously, body wash in a bar of soap has been around forever, but I think we'll start reverting back to these sort of concentrates that go farther. You can put it in your own bottle at home, or just these bars of lotion, soap, whatever it is. I think that's something that I'm really excited about, and products that work as well. Yeah.
That's cool. And I do see that too. I think that's going to become a big thing. And, it's easier to transport and ship. It's easier for sustainability from that perspective. It's everybody can latch on to that and use it and reuse that and extend it out so it becomes more renewable, and ultimately everybody has water and access to water, or can more easily. So you're absolutely right. There's a volume issue there. No, that's really fascinating. So say I'm a young entrepreneur or a new entrepreneur or an up and coming entrepreneur, could be any of those things. Within Becoming Radical, we're always talking to those that are trying to do something different, better, or both, and become a category leader. And, if you were to give advice or guidance to one of those types of entrepreneurs that's looking to enter this sustainability sector, what would that advice look like today? What would you give them if you could say, hey, here's one or two or three things. This is what I would say to do as you're getting into this space.
Wow, that's such a good question that could go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
I would say you have to get creative around the competition that's out there and think of everybody more as an ally, because
Yeah.
sustainability specifically will not be solved by one silver bullet. That's already been proven. If there was a silver bullet, we probably would have already found it. And I think we simultaneously need those working in carbon removal and new products and companies like Finch and everything in between, microgrids, nuclear, et cetera. And so to say, oh, well, you're doing something similar, so I don't need to exist, or you're doing something totally different, so we have nothing in common. It's like everybody should be trying to work together to figure out how they can make an impact in this space. And so I think that's number one, is just don't be afraid. And also, in Finch specifically, this idea is not new and it's not novel. A lot of different people have had this idea and attempted at this idea. And so don't let that, sort of keep you away. Because you might just be that very person who sort of cracked the code. So I think that's what I would say. I also, this isn't as specific to sustainability, but I think as entrepreneurs, you have to wear so many different hats, and not being afraid to ask for help and becoming really good at networking is incredibly helpful in this space. I knew that I never wanted to look at books in my life, and so I hired an accountant almost immediately. To your point about writing contracts, this was sort of pre my experience with AI. I knew nothing about the legalities of these things and wanted to do things right from day one. And so I had a lawyer. You have to sort of be open to filling in the gaps that you don't want to be working on, because entrepreneurship is exhausting, even if you spend all your time doing things that you love. But especially it can be a lot better if you just focus on things that you're good at and that you really enjoy.
Yeah, you nailed it. Your network is your net worth. Once you learn that, it's huge, so powerful. And, you brought up competition. You talked about competition. I really enjoy you talking about that. So many people are so concerned with the competition, with all the noise, that they lose sight of the signal. They lose sight of what they can do for themselves. And, when I think about this, I don't want to be competitive. I want to be compelling, right? I want to change the game. And you're right. There's so many different models out there that exist that are similar, but they're all a little bit different. And if you can create that unification with other brands and other businesses and people that can be allies, that could be really powerful. So great advice. I absolutely love that. And I think our community will see tremendous value on that. One of the last questions I have for you is around personal sustainability practices. How are you incorporating sustainability into your life? And more importantly, how does it track back to Finch and your culture and your mission and your vision at Finch?
Well, I always like to say kind of what I said in the beginning. I have a long way to go, right? I am not by any means perfect. And I think that actually helps in my business, that I'm a little more approachable. I was just texting with friends about how much DoorDash I ordered this past weekend because I wasn't feeling well, and I just couldn't be bothered to go out. That's terrible. That's so much waste. We could have made something at home. We could have gone out and picked it up, etc. So I just wanted to start with that, where there's, it's not always perfect actions over here. I think what I think become good at is taking practices out of my life that are just unnecessary. I've become kind of binary around that's just not something I do. So one example, buying bottles of water. I refuse to do that. I have plenty of reusable, bottles at home. If I'm going to an airport, I'll just bring it. It's now do I have my wallet, my phone, and a water bottle? That's exactly. And it becomes, it's only convenient and easy and tempting if you're used to doing that and you haven't sort of flexed that muscle. But if you habits, what is it? They take 21 days to form. It's really not that long. And so that's one example of this just is something that I don't do, that I don't practice. And that I think has been really helpful. We also, Denver makes it pretty easy. I live in Denver, and that is a really, they pick up composting, which I love. And so we're able to cut down quite a bit on, I guess it's cutting it down because it's not going in the trash. But we were able to compost all of our food, which is really
amazing. It's very cool.
Fun. And those are two things that come to mind. My, having kids, I think, has made it difficult, but also easier in some ways because you have a living example of sort of these future generations, and what you're putting on and in your baby is something that's sort of a new idea for a lot of people. And so I think that simultaneously made it a little bit easier and a little bit harder to practices and to have more of them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Everything changes when you have kids. I have 2 kids too. And, you look at things differently. You think about things differently. You want to do the best you can for them and for the future. It plays such a role, and it's so important because I think it grounds you. It brings you to a new reality, a new train of thought, a new direction. So this has been so great talking with you, and I'm so excited to watch what you're going to do with Finch, and for our listeners and for our viewers to follow you and track you. Where can they find you, and where can they find Finch in market?
Thank you so much, Michael. We're at choosefinch.com, CHOOSEFINCH, and then same Choose Finch on Instagram and TikTok, where we mostly are right now.
TikTok's back. You're back on TikTok. It's good.
Yeah. Instagram and TikTok, both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. Well, wonderful. Well, no, we'll be following you every step of the way as you move forward. We'll be cheering you on. I think you guys are doing some very exciting things, changing and challenging the market, trying to take on a new industry that from a different angle, from a different perspective, really focused on, selection and choice and product fit and sustainability at its core. So this has been great. Thank you for being here, and we'll welcome you back in the future. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Radical. If today's episode sparked something in you, follow wherever you listen, join the conversation, and share it with someone ready to think beyond limits. Be unlimited, be bold, and become radical. See you next time.